this way. When she understood the truth of everything philosophically. Gopikayam unto Mother Yashoda. Sahat, the Supreme Lord. Ishvaraha, the Supreme Controller. Vaishnavim, Vishnu Maya or Yoga Maya. Vyatanot, expanded. Mayam, Yoga Maya. Putrasneya Mahim, very much attached because of maternal affection for her son. Vibhu, the Supreme Lord. So translation, Mother Yashoda, by the grace of the Lord, could understand the real truth. But then again, the Supreme Master, by the influence of the internal potency Yogamaya, inspired her to become absorbed in intense maternal affection for her son. You can repeat. Mother Yashoda, by the grace of the Lord, could understand the real truth. But then again, the Supreme Master, by the influence of the internal potency Yogamaya, inspired her to become absorbed in intense maternal affection for her son. So purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Although Mother Yashoda understood the whole philosophy of life, at the next moment she was overwhelmed by affection for her son by the influence of Yogamaya. Unless she took care of her son Krishna, she thought, how could he be protected? She could not think otherwise, and thus she forgot all her philosophical speculations. This forgetfulness is described by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur as being inspired by the influence of Yogamaya. Mohana Sadharamyan Maya. Materialistic persons are captivated by Mahamaya, whereas devotees, by the arrangement of the spiritual energy, are captivated by Yoga Maya. So we come with the Tatvayam, Gopikayam Sahishvara, Vaishnavim Yatantam Maya, Uchasneha Mahim, Vivahu. So Omagana Timdandasha Gananjana. Shalakaya Chakshur Viditam Yena Tasmai Shi Gurve Namaha. So here it described that initially Yashodamaya understood the tattvas. So this word tattva is actually a very interesting word. It doesn't simply mean the truth, but it means a lot more than that. And of course, the word tat means basically you put an H in there. It's like English, that. And tattva is like thatness. So what does it mean, thatness? It means, according to the Bhagavad Gita, Nasato vijate bhavo na bhavo vijate sataha ubayorapi drishtavantas 20 tatvidashvi. That means things that are real categories that always continue to exist. In other words, the Bhagavad Gita says that those things that don't continue to exist are not real in a ultimate sense, like a soap bubble, or your upadis, like your being an American or Colombiana, that means a Colombian in Spanish, or Española. How do you say so was a Spanish person, a lady? Oh. When do we turn off that? I can't reach it from here.
How can you tell it's Spanish? What's the name for Spaniard?
What's the name for a Spanish lady? Española? Española. So these are not tattvas. Someone's a Colombiana, Española, what? How do you say redneck in Spanish? Or no? What? You don't know. Anyway, yeah, rojo. How do you say neck in Spanish? Rojo cuello. So, someone's a redneck. Someone's a Croatian. Someone's a whatever, Mexicana. You know, all these different things. These are not tattvas. America is not a tattva. Although we often, make the tattva great again. Anyway, so you know, all these things are just like temporary, will o' the wisp, as Srila Prabhupada would say. And they're just like, you know, not real in an ultimate sense. I mean, yes, this country exists, but it's really not real in an ultimate. It's not a tattva. So tattva means those things that continue to exist, and so it's very important. And actually, Bhaktivinoda Thakur very much dwells on this in his Dashamula. You know, what a tattva is, what is real, and what is real is, of course, Krishna is real. The material energy is real, although it changes. We may say, oh, you just said the material energy is not real. I didn't say the material energy is not real. I said the form that the material energy takes at a specific instance is not real. But the material energy is real. It continues to exist. Sometimes bhutva, praliyate. Sometimes it's manifest. Sometimes it's not manifest. But it exists. And the jiva, that's jiva tattva, and then Krishna's spiritual energy, and then maya tattva, yoga maya tattva. These are all tattvas. Anyway, so of course we do worship what's called the pancha tattva. That's another 5 tattvas. That is, then again you have Ishvara, who is the Supreme Personality of God, Lord Chaitanya, and you have Lord Nityananda. Lord Nityananda is not only Vishnu tattva, he's also considered Guru tattva. I was listening to this lecture this morning. Prabhupada was talking about Panchatattva. It's a lecture Prabhupada gave on the Chaitanya Charitamrita before Prabhupada had published the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So Lord Nityananda is Guru Tattva, and he's Vishnu Tattva. And then you have Advaitacharya. And Advaitacharya, of course, is also Vishnu Tattva. And then you have Gadadhar, and he's Shakti Tattva. It means the energy of the Lord. And then, of course, you have Srivas, who is Jiva Tattva. So the impersonalists, and they're called, Nirvishesha. In Prabhupada's mantra we have, isn't it? Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachari. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadeshachari. So this Nirvishesha word means not understanding the distinction between the tattvas. Do you understand that? There's a distinction. They just don't understand how one tattva is distinct from another one. In other words, or another way of understanding nirvishesha is there's no distinction. There's 2 ways of understanding that word, nirvishesha. Yeah, nirvishesha means, impersonalism. Nirvishesha means there's no distinction between the tattvas. Everything is one. Or another way of understanding this nirvishesha is that a misunderstanding of the tattvas, or the distinctions between the tattvas. So, anyway, so which is impersonalist. I'm God, you're God, we're all God, or everything is one, or we lose our identity when we become self-realized, we merge into the absolute, emerge into the effulgence of the Supreme Personality. This is all nirvishesha philosophy. Of course, Sunyavadi is something different. Sunyavadi means voidism. Voidism, nothing is real. Actually, it's interesting nowadays that many scientists are taking a form of Buddhism, not the original Buddhism, but a form of Buddhism that advocates voidism. Nothing is real. Nothing is real. So anyway, so this is the meaning of the word tattva. So vidita tattvayam. She actually understood the truth of everything philosophically. Wow. In other words, Yashodamaya understood the difference between there's Vishnu, there's the Jiva soul. I mean, that's, if you take Prabhupada's words literally here, which I am doing, she understood all these different tattvas. And then the next line is very interesting. Gopikayam sa Ishvara. So then, the supreme Ishvara. Now, Krishna here is referred to as Ishvara, which is one of the tattvas. Ishvara tattva, Vishnu tattva, Ishvara tattva. And Prabhupada said that, another thing I heard this morning, Prabhupada said Krishna is Parameshvara. We're all Ishvaras to a certain extent. We're controlling a certain amount of this material energy or a certain amount of our lives. But Krishna is Parameshvara. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir. Govinda Sarva Karna Karna. So really that's one of the tattvas. So that's why it's interesting that you understand the Sanskrit. That's why Krishna here is referred to as Ishvara, not the word for Krishna is not Krishna here, which is the same person anyway. Because previously in the last line you had vidita tattvayam, which is the tattvas. And so therefore, referring to the tattvas, one of the tattvas, Ishvara, decides to employ another tattva, Vaishnavim, which is Yogamaya. And Yogamaya is actually quite interesting. I did try to do some research about Yogamaya. Of course, the Acharyas say all sorts of different things about Yogamaya and Subhadra, who is Yogamaya, and also Purnamasi in Krishna's pastimes, who is the Yogamaya who arranges for Krishna's pastimes. Yogamaya is having 16 different forms. And I tried my best to find out what those 16 forms were. I couldn't. I went through all Prabhupada's books. I went through the whole internet. Went through Mr. Google. And I couldn't figure out what the 16 forms are. I mean, there were listings of some of them, like Bhadrakali was one of them. Durga is another form. Parvati, but there wasn't one place, a list of all the 16 forms of Yogamaya. And Subhadra, of course, is one of the forms of Yogamaya. But in different circumstances, this is really interesting. Talking about Subhadra. Subhadra, in different circumstances, manifests different aspects of Krishna's internal potency. When she's in Vrindavan, she manifests bhakti. You understand? And here, Yogamaya is manifesting the covering of one's understanding of the tattvas. It was really interesting. So Subhadra and Yogamaya acts differently in different circumstances. I mean, for example, when the residents of Mathura saw Krishna, depending on their particular slant or relationship or philosophical position, they saw Krishna differently. Some of them saw him as death personified. Some of them saw him as the most lovable child. So everybody perceives Krishna differently. Of course, that's also mentioned in the Gita. What is it? Yayata mam prapajante. Tam sataiva bhajamyaham. Yayata mam prapajante. As they surrender unto me, everyone gets reciprocated accordingly. And everyone is on my path. Of course, the impersonalists sometimes use that particular expression, saying that everybody's on the same path. Isn't it? They say something, well, actually everyone's on the same path. And we can counter that particular argument of the impersonalists by saying, yes, everyone's on the same path, but some people are going in one direction, some people are going in another direction. That's a typical expression of the impersonalists. We're all on the same path. Yeah, but you're headed in the wrong direction, buddy. So anyway, so sometimes Subhadra, Yogamaya, she acts as bhakti, the bhakti. Sometimes she acts to arrange for Krishna's pastimes like Purnamasi and Vrindavan. Sometimes she acts to cover the devotees. And then through her expansion in the Bhagavad Gita, I believe it's 725 in the Bhagavad Gita, we have Naham Prakasha Sarvasha, Yogamaya Samavrata, Muda Yam Avijamanti. That for those who are mudhas, Prabhupada was very fond of using the word mudha. Mudha. I mean, I just listening, every morning I listen to Prabhupada's classes released a half an hour before Mangalarti. And you just hear Prabhupada use the mudhas, they're asses. So, but that's of course from Krishna. Naham Prakasha Sarvasha Yogamaya Samavrata. That those who are mudhas, that is, Namam Duskritina Mudha, Bhajante Naranama, Ayaya Pratigyana, Sudam Bhavamashruta. There's actually, even though mudhas is used in that verse in a specific way, sometimes it's used by Prabhupada in a general way. Well, let me explain what I mean. In the verse in the Bhagavad Gita, mudha is just used as a different category of persons who don't surrender to Krishna. But Prabhupada sometimes used the word mudha to include all the categories of people who don't surrender to Krishna. So the four categories of people who don't surrender to Krishna, are people who are just like asses, just have their nose to the grindstone and just like can't think of anything else but, eat, sleep, mate, and defend. That's a muda. Pravajane Naradama. And then lowest of mankind, people who just basically just don't have brains. Either genetically or, for whatever other reason, they don't have the brains to understand. They're just animals. Maya Pratikhyana, those whose knowledge is stolen by illusion. That means, you become so expert in science or philosophy and word jugglery that basically you become so enamored with it you don't even approach the Supreme Lord. And then finally, my Sunabhavamashrita, those people who are really dedicated, their whole life is dedicated to basically dissuading people from worshiping God. Like our friend R.D., Richard Dawkins. His whole life. Can you imagine? It's all right, maybe you think, well, maybe God exists, maybe God doesn't exist. But to dedicate your whole life to God in a negative way is like Kamsa. Right? It's whole life. I mean, it's his focus of life. Can you imagine that? It's like Kamsa's focus was to kill Krishna. So anyway, Prabhupada would call all these four categories, in a general sense, mudhas. They're all asses. So, Naham Prakasha Sarvasha Yogamaya Samavrata Mudayam Navijanati. Actually, Bhagavad Gita says that for those people who are in the category, Prabhupada's category of mudhas, then Krishna covers them with his illusory energy, which is actually an expansion. He said, Yogamaya Samavrata. And Samavrata means to be covered. By Yogamaya. So here, in this particular verse, 725, it's not actually the spiritual manifestation of Yogamaya, it's another one of the forms of Yogamaya. Like we were talking about some of the forms of Yogamaya, the 16 forms, which I don't know the whole list, and maybe someone could find it out for me. Somehow do some research. But, Bhadra Kali, for example. Bhadra Kali is the ferocious form of the Lord. Not the Lord, of Yogamaya, expansion of Yogamaya, Mahamaya. Because Mahamaya is an expansion of Yogamaya. And the interesting thing, another interesting thing I was hearing from Prabhupada, is that Krishna can change, because the energy is one, and manifests differently in different circumstances. Krishna can change matter to spirit and spirit to matter. Which is really interesting. When he can change Mahamaya to Yogamaya, Yogamaya to Mahamaya. Because Krishna is, like Prabhupada gives the example, Krishna is like an expert electrician who could take electricity and turn it to heating energy or cooling energy, depending on the need. So Krishna, just like we're using things in Krishna's service, and this is all, normally wood, everything out like that is a manifestation of Krishna's external energy. But if you use it in Krishna's service, Prabhupada gave another example. He says just like an iron rod can become like fire if you immerse it in the fire for long enough. It gets hotter, 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 and it acts like fire. Or we install the deities. And, everybody knows that, we have marble deities on the altar, right? And some deities are Nimwood deities in different places. So that matter becomes transformed. So in one sense, Krishna's energy is one. Parashara Shakti Vrivadaya Vashuyate Svabhavaki Jnana Balagriyacha. But then she manifests in different ways in order to serve or carry out the purposes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's Vaishnavim. Vyatanam Mayam. And then finally, Mayam. She's referred to here first, two places. Vaishnavim, because she's a Vaishnavi. He's the pure servant of Krishna, Vishnu Maya. And then Yatmanalt, Mayam. And then again, Mayam means here energy. Krishna's energy is Yogamaya. And what does Yogamaya do, according to this verse? Putra Sneha Mayim. There's again the energy that puts one, or the illusion that puts one into the Putra Sneha. Putra Sneha, Putra means, of course, son. The word meaning the person who saves you from hell. That's a typical word for son in Sanskrit. So putra, and actually another thing, Prabhupada said if the son doesn't save you from hell, he's what? Mutra. Because it comes from a particular, anyway, when man and woman have a relationship, there's a particular aperture in the body. And there's urine too, so it's considered the son who is not a devotee or a learned person, according to Chanaka Pandit, is mutra, not putra. He's the son of urine. It's Prabhupada's expression. You've heard it many times. And then, anyway, so putra is a good son. So putra is sneha. So many people in this material world are absorbed in putra sneha. That means attachment to the son. Actually, Prabhupada said that the mother is so attached to the child that he gave several examples. One is that he considers the stool of the child to be like sandalwood pulp. That's one aspect of putra sneha. And then also another one is the blind child has lotus eyes. That's another example. And putra sneha. So this putra sneha in this material world is simply based on the body. So it's just like pumsa striya mituni va metam tayor mito radiya grantiho atogra etc. sutapta vitar janasya moho yam hamameti. It actually takes one away from Krishna. Of course, that's one of the favorite verses in the Radha Damodar party, isn't it? Putra Pumsa Striya Mituni Bhav Meta. You remember that one?
We had classes.
You probably had like thousands of classes on that. Pumsa, that a man and woman get together, Pumsa Striya. And then you can analyze this one. Striya means that the person who increases the enjoyment, right? The Striya.
And what?
So you have Putra Sneha Mayim. In this material world, you also have Putra Sneha Mayim. But this Putra Sneha Mayim in the material world takes one away from Krishna. Whereas Putra Sneha Mayim in the spiritual realm, if one has Krishna, then it brings one to Krishna. And also, another point is, this is actually pointed out by Lord Kapila Deva in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, that if one's son is a devotee, if one is attached to one's son, that also brings one to Krishna. one of the instructions of Lord Kapila Dev to Devahuti was the very same attachment that one has for materialistic persons or materialistic things. If it's focused on the devotee of the Lord, then that same attachment could be the cause of your liberation. Which is interesting. So if one is attached to their child who's a devotee, or attached to having their child become a devotee, then that's not a Mahamaya, that's Yogamaya. I mean, that's the spiritual energy, that's devotional service. But if someone is attached, like let's say my mother was, or is, to me becoming a doctor or something like that, that's Putra Sneha Mahamayim. So in other words, attachment is not bad. Like we were talking about yesterday, that, attachment, we were in the early days of the movement, especially Radha Damodar, myself too, we were talking about all attachment was bad. You have to be detached from everybody. But if you're attached to someone, like if the husband is attached to the wife, as far as bringing her Krishna consciousness, doing the best thing for someone, that attachment is a cause of liberation, even if the wife's not a pure devotee. Just because you're attached to bringing someone to Krishna. That attachment is not Mahamaya, that attachment is Yogamaya, spiritual. So we're not advocating that one give up all attachment for family, society, friendship, and love, but one spiritualize that attachment, and that attachment becomes the cause of your liberation. Just like, another example is like a thorn, using a thorn to remove a thorn. So attachment removes the thorn of material entanglement. So anyway, so Putra Sneha Mayam. So it's a very interesting verse. And then again, the last word here, I just thought we'd analyze it Sanskrit somehow or other. Krishna's giving me a little intelligence. So Vibhuhu means the great one. The Supreme Lord. Prabhupada translates the Supreme Lord. So here, the references to Krishna in this verse are actually in references to the tattvas, to Krishna's ontological position. You don't really have the word Krishna in this verse. You have the tattvas, which is contrasting to the first line here. Vidita tattvayam. She understood the truth of everything philosophically. Does everyone understand what I'm talking about? And then you have Krishna referred to Ishvara and Vibhuhu in terms of his, his ontological position. Let me describe what ontological means for those of you. That means basically the nature of one. Our ontological position is Jiva soul. Does that make sense? It's ontology means the study of the nature, the ultimate nature of something. So the Krishna's ontological position, so it's interesting, Krishna is not referred to in what we would say a personal way here, except in Putra Sneha, referring to Krishna, her attachment to Krishna. Krishna is referred to in terms of his tattva in this verse, and that contrasts with, or it doesn't contrast, it actually reflects the first line, itam vidita tattvayam. All right. Any questions or comments about this? I thought it was quite interesting, this whole study of tattvas.
In this verse, the idea of the tattvas, or the tattvas, the nature of the Supreme Lord was presented as though they were part, and yet the Putra Sneha Mayim conquers that.
Yeah, conquers.
So she is completely taken by this, by the love for her son. So everything else goes bad.
Yeah, everything else is negated by that.
Yeah, everything detracts.
Yeah, everything else is negated by this putra snake. All the, that's true. It negates everything else in the verse. That, you know, the Krishna is the Vibhu, Krishna is the Ishwara. She doesn't care about any of that stuff. In the beginning, the first line is she understood the tattvas, and then after that, she lost her understanding of tattvas.
We can see with material examples also, like the mother of somebody who's very, very prominent in politics, for example.
Mother what?
The mother of somebody who may be very prominent
Yeah,
in some field, maybe politics.
yeah.
It's the same thing. The material, there is also a reflection in the sense that we can see how this mother may understand that the sun is so important and everybody's bound to the sun. That is her son.
Yeah.
For her, that is the most important thing, more than the fame and the neutrality of this son that she has. So many reflections of the spiritual truths that we can see used as examples in material, within the material plane.
Yes, I mean, even Devaki, she asked Krishna to bring back all of her dead sons so she could feed them, isn't it? I mean, it's amazing. The mother's attachment to the son is the strongest or the closest thing to pure love in this world, probably. So yes. And of course, as far as illusory things, the attachment between men and women is more illusory than the attachment between the mother and the son. Actually, there's one person I forget. There is no illusion so complete that, you know, when you have the thing between men and women.
Intoxication.
Lust makes world.
You know, intoxication, Pum's history, me too. You know, there's many verses, and I'm sure Krishna Prabhu was memorizing them all when he was with Radha Damodar, or tried to forget them. But
I can tell you about classes that I can't tell you about.
especially some of Tamal Krishna classes.
Yeah, well, others do.
For Ruth.
I thought it interesting that Yoga Maya is in the female position.
Yeah.
I'm just interested to know it's a major engagement. What she's.
Yeah, oh yeah, she has the best engagement. I mean, the best among the best, other than Krishna, the best among the best are females. The gopis are the best devotees. Radharani is the best devotee. The rivers are actually all female, and sacred rivers are all females. We're actually talking about this on the GBC conferences. This one river, the Chandrabhaga River. And Lokanath Maharaj wants to install a Chandrabhaga deity, and there's a whole discussion. Do we want to have other deities worshipped in ISKCON? So, but all like you have Ganga Devi, Yamuna Devi. I mean, all the sacred rivers are ladies. Of course, the mountains are men. What's that? Yeah. Mountains are all men.
So what's the problem with having ladies?
Boats are all ladies. The boats.
Both? Oh.
Yeah.
Far field here.
Yeah, in practically every language, she, the boats.
It depends. Could be barco.
Aerobark?
Could be boat.
Yeah.
They oftentimes name the boats after women.
Yeah, women. So, what's the other
What's
question?
the problem with having ladies as gurus in that?
Yeah, what is the problem? What is the problem? I don't know what the problem is. Maybe you can tell me. There's no problem. I mean, ladies, Krishna consciousness is above the bodily platform. I mean, there has to be some aspect of varnashram too where the ladies are protected. I'm not saying that, there is varnashram. Ladies are protected by the husband, the son, father, and things like that, which is part of the culture that we're trying to teach. But when you're talking about, being a guru, a spiritual thing, that's transcendental to varnashram. Still, varnashram has to be observed to keep society stable. So there's both things have to be considered. but there's no problem. Okay, on that happy note.